Welcome back to Root Double. Now I should have my video problem sorted out from last episode when I not only had to splice the credits into the recording, but also couldn't actually see them. Where did that happen? Apparently there's a recent bug with the Windows update that got pushed out right after I finished all my recording stuff for the after out. So, left off here, I believe. We kind of have some weird scene dissonance. With Yuuri talking into our soul. Yeah, we'll keep this. There. Took a closer look at Mashiro's finger, and sure enough there was a small wound on it. Natsuhiko took a bandage out of the medicine box and wrapped it around Mashiro's finger. Oh. That happens. Natsuhiko finished wrapping the bandage. And with that, she went back to the kitchen. Oh, there's the Chapter 2 card. I thought we missed it. Everyday sight. Peaceful morning, just like the last. Eventually, Yuuri came out of her room, too. Good morning, Yuuri.
Yuuri.
After an exchange of salutations, Yuuri waited to eat breakfast with the other two. Natsuhiko enjoyed these leisurely mornings of his. Natsuhiko and Mashiro laid out breakfast for three on the table. What's for breakfast today? Thanks for the food. Thus another ordinary morning began. After breakfast was over, Natsuhiko sighed. Oh. Natsuhiko hustled to get himself ready for school. And then he and Mashiro bade farewell to Yuuri. With that voice at their backs, Natsuhiko turned on the lights and left. Turned on the lights? And once they reached the bus stop to wait for the bus, Mashiro cheerfully mused. Eh? But I can't repeat the feat. True, yesterday, Natsuhiko did use telepathy at the scene of the accident, albeit just once. However, no matter how much he tried, he couldn't do it a second time. Which would require me to actually do it again? Obtaining Ability Level 1 certification made tuition slightly cheaper. However, you had to perform several tests of telepathy ability in front of your homeroom teacher to obtain it. It's a self-feeling exam. Or maybe. wonder if we can actually do it. Notice that choices aren't really that... Can't think of the right word for it. There's usually only one split point with one person's senses level, and that's usually midway. Beyond that, it's usually who is higher at a given point. Why not? Believe in ourselves.
わかった。エナ先生の前で恥かきたくないんだ。
まあそれもあるけど能力レベルとかあまり興味ないってのがより大きいね。僕は能力レベル0のままでも全然構わないんだ。
そうなの？まあいいけどさ。
Mashiro shrugged her shoulders. Eh? Right about then the bus arrived. Eh.
そんな簡単に諦めちゃうの？
Let's do this instead.
まあ僕は
そうなの？
なんか言いたげだな。
There we go.
いや別にただテレパシーも使えて。
I want to see something.
そうなの？
なんか言いたげだな。
What does that sound mean? It seems like there's certain choices where that plays and your bond doesn't change. And then you saw what just happened before, previously, where we just exited out of it. Does this mean that something we're gonna get a different scene, or?
いや別にただテレパシーも使えて損はないかもよ。もしも夏彦に超能力があったらみんなを笑顔にさせてあげられるかもしれないしさ。
Oh, we got a tip out of it.
なんだそれ。
昨日買ったボイスドラマ版ビヨンドビヨンド第1話のセリフ。
Ah,
あ、そう。
Natsuhiko shrugged his shoulders. And right around then, the bus arrived. Okay, this is a little bit of extra dialogue. Natsuhiko and Mashiro boarded the bus and headed to school. Mashiro. Not Mashiro. Transfer student. As soon as they arrived at school, they heard the usual clamor of telepathy.
宗像さん、おはようございます。俺は振られても諦めませんよ。
またあんた？だから無差別テレパシーでそういうこと言うのやめてって言ってるでしょ。っていうかあんたどこの誰なの？なんで普通に口で告白しないのよ。
シャイなもんでこういう形でしか告白できないんです。
そんなこと言われたってね。私もあんたの固有の波形わかんないから無差別テレパシーで答えるしかないのよ。あもう
行くぞストレート。外角低め。
Oh, they're still playing baseball, and it's right in the morning.
だからバレバレだって。
Going for a straight out.
何？カーブだと。どうだ。ダダ漏れテレパシーを逆手に取った心理戦。くっさー。なんだそのドヤ顔。
Don't ask me why we're playing baseball first thing in the morning.
しかし新業。俺たちの密談ってずっと学内にダダ漏れだったってことか。
Yes.
ああ、まずいな。俺も昨日まで知らなかったよ。
You're both fools.
どうりで女子の視線が冷たいわけだ。このままじゃいかんぞ。秘密特訓でもするか。
Natsuhiko and Mashiro walked down the hallway, trying to ignore the noise. Once they got into the classroom and sat in their seats, the bell rang. I do love these school backgrounds. There's so much life in them. Soon enough, Anna walked in.
皆さん、おはよ
Even just the small changes, like people going in.
おはようございます。
small changes just from
いい
before
返事
school
ね。
to sitting at school.
さて、今日はちょっとした事件があります。このクラスに新しい仲間が一人増えました。
お、転校生？女の子っすか？
そうよ。それじゃ、三宮さん、入ってきて。
Anna turned to the door and called to someone outside. And in response, a short girl walked into the classroom. Natsuhiko had seen that girl before.
おお、まさかの金髪娘だ。
That is indeed Louise's theme.
ハーフかな。ちっちゃくてかわいい。
っていうか小さすぎね。小学生？
Introduction of the sweet, precious little girl had the class ecstatic. But in contrast to the excitement, Natsuhiko's face merely went stiff. And girl. There was no doubt about it. That was the very same girl that had been staring at Natsuhiko and Mashiro at the scene of the accident yesterday. Even the stuffed animal in her arms looked familiar. She had to be the same girl. Girl is now my classmate.
はい。それじゃあ自己紹介してね。
With that signal, the girl opened her lips.
三宮ルイーズユイ。
That was it. That was apparently all she had to say about herself.
三宮さんはお母様がフランスの方で、今まではフランスに住んでました。日本の文化には不慣れで戸惑うかもしれないけど。いや、別に戸惑いはしない。気遣いは不要。あら、さようでございますか。
Fair enough. She shut Anna down in fluent Japanese. Anna quickly recovered and continued where she left off.
三宮さんは13歳ですが、飛び級でこのクラスに編入してきたそうです。
Oh, you're telling me she's baby.
すっげえ。いわゆる天才児っすか？
かもしれないけど、それ以前に同じクラスで学ぶ仲間よ。みんな仲良くしてあげてね。はーい。
Ever since around 2025, even Japanese schools started allowing for students to skip grades, so a 13-year-old high schooler was not entirely out of the ordinary. But they were still uncommon. This was the first time Natsuhiko had actually seen one.
それじゃあ三宮さん、ホームルームを始めるから、まずは座ってね。席は一番後ろの窓際よ。
Anna pointed to the seat next to Mashiro's.
理解した。
Acknowledging the teacher indifferently, the girl named Sannomiya started walking to her new seat. Her gaze locked upon Natsuhiko the entire way. Hello there. What's with her? But she said nothing, slipping in beside Natsuhiko to reach her seat.
夏彦、ずいぶん可愛い子だね。
ああ、確かに。
Well, that's a thing.
お人形さんみたいだよね。やっぱハーフの子って綺麗なんだね。
確かに人種的な要素もあるかもしれないけど。
Regardless of how he put it, she was an eye-catchingly beautiful girl. She's a little young.
でもなんか
That's
夏彦
weird.
のことじっと見てなかった？
そうかな。
まさか知り合いとか？
いや。
でもこいつは面白くなってきたね。
Nope, don't even go there.
え？何が？
ハーフの転校生なんて盛り上がるじゃん。非日常じゃん。こりゃやっぱ友達にならなきゃ。
Okay, fair.
ミーハ
We
ー
can do
だ
that.
な、お前。
As they spoke, Anna continued on with homeroom. After a few short announcements, Mashiro's big sister instinct is kicking in.
じゃあ朝のホームルームはおしまい。それじゃあ皆さんまた午後にね。
Anna departed as the classroom with a farewell. As if waiting for their cue, all the girls made a beeline to Sannomiya's desk.
ねえねえ、三宮さんってフランスのどこに住んでたの？休みの日とか何してるの？どうしてこんな中途半端な時期に引っ越ししてきたの？
In light of all the questions,
住んでいたところはアンドレジ。
Oh.
休日は読書する。転居理由は家庭の事情。以上。それで。
very matter of fact. She answered all the questions in one breath and then looked at each of the girls. The girls fell silent at her intense gaze.
それがどうしたの？いや、どうしたってわけじゃ。
She's not interested in making friends.
ほら、周りが年上ばっかりだと溶け込みづらいかなって思って。
She's just sitting here like, I may be baby, but you're all little children.
あ、そうそう。それでこっちから話しかけようかと。気遣い不要。年下扱いも望むところではない。年齢が2つ3つ違っても人間性にさほどの影響はないはず。まあ理解した。ならば普通に扱ってくれればいい。
Sannomiya bluntly answered as she took a paperback out of her bag. Not an ounce of warmth could be felt from her voice. What was that all about? Did she just not like being interrogated? Was that a show of her pride as a child prodigy? In any case, she definitely seemed the type to distance herself from other people.
急に話しかけてごめんね。ねえ、行こっか。うん。
One by one, the girls left Sannomiya alone. That didn't discourage a certain other girl from approaching her.
はい、ボンジュール、マドモアゼル・ルイー
It was Mashiro. Sannomiya shuddered for a second before glaring at her. What?
あれ？ボンジュール。ボンジュール。あ、ボンジュールで会ってたんだ。よかった。ちょっと自信なかったんだ。
Awkward silence. Mashiro darted her eyes back and forth, perhaps looking for a topic of conversation before resting those eyes on the books Sannomiya was holding.
おーっと、趣味が読書とは渋いね。私の友達も本好きなんだけどさ。
Yuuri.
そう。その本は私も読んだことあるよ。名作だよね。SF ジュブナイルのマスターピースだよね。ね。
I too have been known to enjoy books. No matter what Mashiro said, Sannomiya would not humor her with a proper reply. I feel like there's some unintentional comedy here with Salyu being rendered so low in the frame. She's baby! Natsuhiko held his breath, watching their little exchange out of the corner of his eye.
何か用なの？いや、せっかくクラスメートになったんだしさ、友達になりたいってだけなんだけど。
Mashiro said, heeding Sannomiya's wish not to be treated as a younger child. However, Sannomiya herself merely furrowed her eyebrows in displeasure. It's enough, Mashiro. Give it up. She's clearly rejecting you. Natsuhiko was about to stop Mashiro, but right before he could, Sannomiya murmured.
好きにすればいい。
Oh, an unexpected reaction. He was sure she was going to reject her.
やった。それじゃあ改めて自己紹介ね。私は鳥羽真白で、こっちは友達の夏彦。
Right, me too. I have to be friends? I'm happy with my number of friends. I don't want more. Natsuhiko jumped, startled to hear his own name come up.
おい真白、勝手に僕まで紹介するなよ。
何を固いこと言ってんの。友達の友達は友達でしょ。さあ、ほらほら挨拶して。年長者から。
Mashiro pulled Natsuhiko to his feet by the arm. There really was no way that he could back down at this point.
天川夏彦です。よろしく。
よろしく。さて、なんて呼んだらいいかな。三宮さん、ルイーズちゃん、ユイニャン。どれも可愛い名前だから迷うな。別にどれでも。そうだ、その3つを縮めてサリュっていうのはどう？
おいおい真白、早速あだ名って慣れ慣れしすぎないか？
いやいや、やっぱ友達との距離を近くするのはあだ名ですよ。ユーリもそう言ってました。
Oh boy. Don't know what this is gonna actually do.
ねえどう？サリュってのは私としては可愛いと思うんだけどな。うん、別にそれでもいい。本当
Mashiro nodded to herself repeatedly. Natsuhiko was a little surprised at how easily the nickname was approved.
意外と素直だな。もしかして気に入った？このあだ名。
まあ。
She answered quite simply. But did she really like it, or was she just sick of Mashiro talking and wanted to get it over with? Probably the latter, I'd say.
じゃあサリュー、これからよろしくね。
Sannomiya, now christened Salyu, had begun the day with a thoroughly cold attitude. But just like that, she was gradually eased into becoming Mashiro and Natsuhiko's new friend. Emphasis on the air quotes. Enfant terrible! Oh no! The first lesson of the day was English. Clear voice rang out in the silent classroom. Can't wait till we meet Liquid Salyu!
It is only with the heart that one can see lightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye.
Salyu was chosen by the teacher right off the bat to read out of the textbook. Once Salyu finished reading, the teacher spoke.
Excellent! 適切な発音でとても美しかったわ。それでは日本語訳はできますか、三宮さん。
心でしか人は正確に物を見ることができない。肝心な点は目には見えない。
That's right! では座って結構ですよ。
Salyu slid back into her seat, her expression remaining unchanged despite the praise. The unconcerned look on her face perhaps implied she doesn't really think it was that big a deal.
ではこの例文の文法ですが。
Complete disregard of the teacher who was continuing the lesson, Mashiro whispered.
サリュー、さすがいい発音だね。聞き惚れちゃったよ。
But Salyu merely turned her head and looked the other way.
釣れない。
Uh-oh.
そりゃそうだ。授業中だぞ。前見ろよ真白。
Despite accosting Mashiro for doing the same thing, Natsuhiko sneaked a peek at Salyu himself. She gazed listlessly at the screen with a look on her face that made her seem quite hard to approach. A child prodigy, huh? Perhaps there really were concrete things that separated the geniuses from the ordinary. Only she had some sort of weak spot we could use to find some common ground. At least that's what Natsuhiko thought, but next class was physical education, which only gave Salyu an opportunity to display even more talent. Whoa! With a yell, Salyu did a handstand, leg spread. Oh, damn. Family and friends. Whoa! Without falling over, she proceeded to cross the balance beam while spinning around. Teacher and students cheered. Well, geez. Even Natsuhiko and Mashiro watched with gaping mouths.
すごい。
Oh.
ああ、たかが体育の授業なのにな。
Phys ed teacher merely instructed students to use the balance beam in a freestyle performance, yet she calmly pulled off that bold move. It appeared it wasn't just her intelligence that was superior to the ordinary 13-year-old, but her physical ability too.
天は彼女に難物を与えりゃ気が済むんでしょうか。美貌、知性、身体能力がそれや大三元だよ。100万だよ。
真白、例えが親父臭いぞ。
True.
しかもこの学校に来ている以上 PC も当然使えるってことは大三元どころか大数詞。やばいね。パーフェクトガールだよ。
While Mashiro was getting herself excited, Natsuhiko only had a vague feeling that something wasn't right. Would a girl like that bother transferring to a school like ours? Probably to study BC. Or could there be some other reason? Perhaps since his meeting with her left such an impression, there were quite a few things that bugged him about her. In the end, aside from Salyu's bold move, nothing particularly odd happened that period, and thus morning classes came to a close. For lunch break, this scene's just fucking called LABO. An extracurricular lesson was scheduled for afternoon classes. Students were to board a bus for a field trip to an outside facility. Natsuhiko and the others left the school with Enna. As they waited at the bus stop in front of the school gate, Mashiro talked to Salyu again.
サリュー、学食美味しかった？
Lousy.
普通。
They were apparently talking about the food they ate just a while ago. Normal, huh? So how long is she going to keep up the lone wolf act?
ただ、少し驚いた。え？何に？食事を自ら買うというシステムに。食事はすべて運ばれてくるものだと思っていたから。
Natsuhiko couldn't help but interject at her odd statement.
食事が運ばれてくるだって？
That
お嬢様学校みたいなところだとそうなのか？
お嬢様学校とやらの定義がよくわからないけど、自分で食事を買い求めたのは初めて。
I feel like just by virtue of saying that, you went to a rich girl school.
そういうものか？
Natsuhiko was taken a little by surprise, but Mashiro, on the other hand, spoke calmly.
はあ、さすがおフランスの学校ってのはハイソなんだね。
Yeah.
まあ他にもよくわからないことがあったら何でも質問してよ。わからないこと。
Salyu pondered Mashiro's offer for a bit, then
あれは何？
pointed outside the school gate and inquired. Salyu's finger was aimed at a camera overlooking the street in plain sight.
ああ、監視カメラだよ。監視カメラ。生徒を監視するための？違うよ。不審者が学校に入ってこないように見張ってるだけ。
Salyu says no to oppressive surveillance states.
そういえば、昨日街の中でもあれを見かけた。どこにでもあるの？そう。監視カメラは6名士の至るところにあって、犯罪者に睨みを利かせているのさ。
They tell you that, but then they have everybody under surveillance. Mashiro explained. I can't talk gooder. Explained pridefully. Security cameras established high levels of public order within the city.
おかしな街。何か奇妙な感じがする。確かにちょっと特殊かもね。この街はほら、政令指定機密都市だからさ。それは何？多分この国独特の制度なんだけど。そうだ、夏彦、整形とか得意でしょ？説明してあげてよ。
僕が？
Seemed like Mashiro wanted to make Natsuhiko and Salyu talk. Natsuhiko sighed and started explaining.
つまりさ、この市は政府による科学特区指定がなされていて、治安第一の条例が敷かれているんだよ。そのためにいろいろと特殊な制度や該当設備があるんだ。監視カメラはその一環さ。
他にどういう得意点が？
まず転居するにも複雑な手続きが必要なこととか。 町に出入りするだけでも市役所に届けを出さなければならないとかかな。
どうしてそこまで。
研究施設が多い以上、産業スパイとかに狙われる可能性を憂慮してセキュリティには万全が期されているってことらしい。国策に関わる重要な研究も数多く行われてるから、研究成果の流出を警戒してるんだ。
そうそう、噂じゃ電話とかメールもフィルタリングされているって話だよ。
That's scary.
どうサリュー、そういうの聞くと街全体が秘密研究所って感じしない？ SF っぽくてかっこいいでしょ。
Salyu's just sitting there like, you idiot, you absolute buffoon, you're living under a surveillance state. Salyu stared in wonder at Mashiro's pressing question. Like, you actually feel amazed.
また真白の妄想が始まったか。生まれた時から住んでると普通の光景だろ。
Yeah, I suppose it does.
監視カメラだって警官パトロール中の張り紙みたいなもんだ。心にやましいところがなければ気にもならない。
That's what they always say.
でも少々過剰な警備のように思える。いやいや、ちょっと過剰なくらい警備した方が安心できるんだよ。何しろこの街にはあれがあるからさ。
Mashiro pointed to the bus stop's provided map as she spoke. Drawn on the edge of the map, the outskirts of town was a huge hexagonal building.
あれはラボだよ。六名市最大の研究施設で日本を代表する原子力研究所だよ。
Natsuhiko stiffened at the sound of those words. That was the very same singular thing that bothered him about this city. LABO, its proper name being the Sixth Laboratory of Atomic and Biological Organization. Independent administrative corporation that developed technology and conducted research on atomic energy and its biological effects. It was a national facility, but its management was entrusted to Rokume City. One thing was special about this facility. There was a small-scale nuclear reactor housed within the premises for research purposes. It used to perform several tasks from nuclear fission experiments to nuclear fusion reactor development, an enormously profitable field of research. For the risks the research brought, the national government provided subsidies to the city. As a result, the formerly ordinary Rokume City was reborn as the city of scientific research it was today. In terms of economics, industry, and science altogether, LABO could very well be said to be the town's core.
産業スパイが狙うとしたらあそこだよ。世界でも最先端の設備や研究者が揃ってるって話だし。そして夏彦のお母さんはその代表なんだよね。
Oh ho. Mashiro smiled as she brought up the subject.
まあね。
Natsuhiko did not smile, but Natsuhiko looked slightly ashamed about it. Natsuhiko's mother, Dr. Miyoko Tenkawa, was a researcher at LABO. Natsuhiko didn't quite know everything about her credentials, but he knew that she was an apparently world-leading physicist. However, Natsuhiko wasn't very fond of his cool-headed researcher of her mother. Ooh, I guess the research results Mom's team produces do provide the city with huge profits. Both the town's prosperity and our livelihoods benefit from it, but still. True enough, Natsuhiko's mother had quite a high salary. Despite that fact, Natsuhiko really did not like the facility of LABO itself that much. It wasn't just because he didn't get along with his mother. The real reason had to do with Natsuhiko's personal past. Oh! If only I didn't go to LABO that day. This is tied to Yuuri. Instead, bitter regret spread throughout his heart.
何夏彦、急に黙り込んで。
え？ああ。
I want to know more about that day.
なんでもないよ。それよりバスはまだかな。
When he said that, the bus came rolling in.
はい、皆さん。席順は決まってないから適当に乗り込んでね。
それじゃあ二人とも近くの席に座ろうよ。
まあいいよ。なんか他の男子に睨まれそうだけど。
Salyu looked like she wanted to say something. Eventually, she just nodded at Mashiro's words and boarded the bus.
さて、みんな着いたわよ。
Anna called out to her students.
ここが6名士における BC 研究のメッカ、超心理学研究所よ。
Zorkame City Parapsychology Research Center, or the PRC for short. Zorkame City's largest BC research facility had achieved many research breakthroughs in the past.
それじゃあ早速中に入ってみましょう。
Natsuhiko and the rest of the class followed Anna, who seemed oddly excited for the field trip. Oh! God, that's all the nameless faces in here. They're all unique. They're all so cool. Once the class was inside, a staff member in charge of guiding visitors began to explain various things relating to the facility and BC in general.
ここはオフィスとなっておりまして、各種実験データの分析などを行っております。
Also do accounting and other
主に生物学
boring
的
shit.
見地から BC 使用時の脳の働きとその関連性を
Mashiro and the other students listened on curiously, but Natsuhiko was completely inattentive. For a cutting-edge research facility, they got a pretty ordinary-looking office. He was merely pondering dumb thoughts like that. In contrast to Natsuhiko, the most curious of them all was...
なるほど、勉強になります。
their leader, Anna.
BC 粒子関連の研究なんかもここで行っているんですか？
He's really into this.
そういった研究は別の研究室で行っております。機密レベルが高いのでお見せできませんが、例えばある研究室では脳内におけるマインド粒子の作用およびワンダラー粒子との相互作用について研究しております。
Intracerebral mind particles.
BC 使用時に脳内で発生するエネルギー量の測定、分析などは？
そういったことももちろんやっておりますよ。例えばレベル4のコミュニケーターの方の場合、最大10マイクロスカラーバリュー程度のエネルギー量が
And thus Anna and the staff member essentially had a one-on-one conversation, ignoring the students. And eventually the field trip came to a close.
はい、どうでしたか皆さん？面白かったわね。
You looked like you had fun. As they left the facility, Anna spoke to the lined-up students.
一番面白がってたのは先生じゃないですか。途中から専門用語だらけで置いてかれちゃいましたよ。
A few students laughed at Mashiro's jab.
そうね、ごめんなさい。他の先生とああいう話はできないからちょっと盛り上がってしまって恥ずかしいわ。ともかくこれで今日の授業は終わりです。学校に帰るバスもあるけど現地解散も OK よ。
Take the long way home.
皆さん帰り道に気をつけてね。家に着くまでが課外授業ですよ。
With that piece of advice, the field trip was over. Students dispersed in every which way. Since Natsuhiko and the others were not part of any clubs and thus had no business on campus after school, they decided to head straight home.
し、そんじゃ夏彦、帰ろっか。
Alrighty.
そうだな。
Natsuhiko half-heartedly replied. Ah man, kinda tired. Sharp-sighted Anna caught sight of Natsuhiko's yawn and called out to him.
お疲れのご様子ね、天川くん。
先生。
Anna smiled dryly when Natsuhiko twitched.
ダメよ。課外授業中もぼーっとしていたでしょう。
I'll have to...
すみません。
天川くんは超心理学があまり好きじゃないのかしら。担当教師としては悲しいんだけど。
違うんです先生。ただ実は僕 BC ってもの自体が苦手なんですよ。理由は一口じゃ説明できないんです
が。Natsuhiko spoke what was on his mind, on which Mashiro cut in beside him.
夏彦も昔はこんなに BC 嫌いじゃなかったんですけど、年々苦手意識が強くなっちゃったみたいで。
なるほどね。でもそういう人は昔から多いわ。
Anna smiled somewhat sadly as she spoke.
私は そんな人々の意識をできれば変えたいと思ってるのよ。そのために超心理学の教師になったようなものなの。
To change people's perspectives.
私自身はコミュニケーターでもないのにね。ちょっと変かしら。
いや、ちっとも変じゃないです。
Natsuhiko struggled to find a reply. Just as Anna said, she was a parapsychology teacher, but couldn't use BC in the slightest. For someone of Anna's generation, that was only natural. The great worldwide communicator boom only began about 16 years ago, after all. The vast majority of those born before that couldn't use BC. Even the teachers at Rokume Academy were no exception. However, Natsuhiko was somewhat fond of having a female teacher this close to his own age. How old are you, Anna? So in a rare display of goodwill, Natsuhiko gave reluctant words of encouragement.
その立派だと思います。超心理学の教師になりたがる人は少ないと聞きますから。
ありがとう。
でも先生はどうしてそんな志を持ったんですか？先生の世代の方が BC 嫌いの人が多いって聞きますけど。
There probably still are.
それはね、トバさん。そうすることが今後の社会にとってとても大切なことだと思っているからよ。
Anna's face suddenly turned serious at that point in the conversation.
これから人と人との関わり方は大きく変わってくる。きっと社会の在り方もね。今各国では BC の研究とコミュニケーターの保護に力を入れているし、誰もがその可能性に期待しているわ。
可能性って言いますと？
例えばテレパシーでは感情を対象者に直接伝えることができるじゃない？これはいずれ精神治療の分野に応用できるだろうと考えられているのよ。例えば思いっきり明るい感情を対象者に送り込めば精神疾患の原因となる感情を駆逐できるかもしれないってね。
I don't know how I feel about the ethics of that.
なるほど。それっていい使い方ですね。
ひょっとしたらうちの学校からもそういうニュータイプなセラピストが出てくるかもしれないね。
ええ。でもその一方で扱い方を間違えたら危険なものでもある。 BC の歴史はまだ浅いもの。これが社会にとって良い技術になるのか悪い技術になるのか
It can be either.
何もわからない。でもせっかくなら良い技術になるよう若いコミュニケーターたちを導いてあげたい。そう思ったから私はこの仕事を志したのよ。
Anna was usually playful, but here she spoke with a serious tone of voice.
先生、かっこいいです。尊敬しちゃいます。
そう言ってもらえると教師冥利に尽きるわ。
As Anna spoke, she glanced at Natsuhiko.
だからこそね、天川くん。私は生徒のみんなには BC に対し正しい理解をしてほしいのよ。
はい。
今日の課外授業もいつもの実習も全てはそのためのカリキュラムなの。その対象を知ろうともしないまま嫌っちゃダメよ、ね。
なるほど。わかりました。なるべく努力します。
今はそれで十分よ。
And with that, Anna turned back.
それじゃあ先生職員の人にもう一度挨拶してくるわ。また明日学校でね。
はい。また明日。
先生さようなら。
With that exchange of farewells, they parted ways with Anna. Once Anna was out of earshot, Mashiro accosted Natsuhiko with a mischievous smile.
やれやれ。夏彦はエナ先生の前では素直なんだからな。
Hey, it wasn't intentional.
そう見えたか？
そりゃね、努力しますとか言っちゃって、そんなこと大して思ってないくせに。
Bullseye. He himself had forgotten in the heat of the moment, but Natsuhiko staunchly hated BC. His classmates were mastering telepathy one by one, but no matter how much time had passed, Natsuhiko remained at ability level 0. He would completely lose motivation during parapsychology lessons, even now when Anna was the parapsychology teacher.
いやでもな、正直に答えたら先生が傷つくだけだろ。
まあね、先生本当に BC が好きみたいだからね。
いや、多分それだけじゃないぞ。扱い方を間違えたら危険と言ってたし、過去に BC 絡みで何か嫌な目にあったのかもな。だからきっとあんなに真剣に話してたんだよ。
Probably.
さすがよく見てる。
Right as Mashiro said that, a voice suddenly came up from behind.
あなたたちもそう思う？
They turned around in surprise to see Salyu standing there behind them.
サリュー？どうしたの、やぶから棒に。
あなたたちもそう思うって何が？
Yeah.
BC は扱い方を間違えたら危険だって思ってる。
Yeah. That was the first time Salyu was the one to initiate the conversation. Natsuhiko answered, somewhat surprised.
いや、まあ、昔からそういう風に言われているよ。
We don't believe that?
フランスでは違うの？さあ。
さあって、何が言いたいんだ？
別に意見を聞きたかっただけ。用は済んだ。それじゃ。
With that, Salyu promptly tried to leave.
おい。
ちょっと待って、サリュー。何？せっかくだから一緒に帰らない？もうすぐ住宅街方面のバスが出るから。断る。行くところがあるから。
Eh? Salyu turned down Mashiro's offer and walked away, leaving just the two of them behind.
なんだあれ。
不思議ちゃんだね。
International girl of mystery. And after a moment of confusion, they headed to the bus stop, still at a loss to explain what happened. Natsuhiko and Mashiro boarded the bus back home.
それにしてもあの子、やっぱりちょっと妙だな。
Mashiro turned her head to the side in response to Natsuhiko's comment.
何？サリューのこと？
だってそうだろ。急に妙な質問したり、そのくせ質問の意味は話さなかったり、なんかじっと見られたかと思えば距離を置かれたり、どういうつもりかさっぱりわからない。
何それ、寂しいこと言わないでよ。せっかく友達になったのに。多分サリューは緊張してるだけだよ。明日からは一緒に帰ってくれるって。
I don't think that's the case, but we can hope.
そうかな。向こうが本当に友達だと思ってるかどうか怪しいもんだ。
Yeah, that's more likely.
もう、夏彦ガード硬すぎ。昔はそんな子じゃなかったでしょ。誰とでも気軽に友達になってたじゃん。
And then I went to LABO.
そりゃ子供の頃の話だろ。高校生にもなれば人との付き合い方も変わるさ。
お堅いな。困ったもんだね、まったく。
As soon as Mashiro finished speaking, an announcement rang out on the bus's speakers.
次は6名公演。6名公演。お降りの方はお手元のボタンを押してください。
あ、6名公演だって。久しぶりだね。
ああ、子供の頃はよくここで遊んだな。
And true enough, outside the window was a huge park. Since they usually didn't take this way back, the bus route was different.
ねえ、せっかく子供の頃の話が出たんだし、ちょっと寄っていかない？
やだよ。ここで降りたら家まで結構歩かなきゃならないぞ。
童心に帰ろうよ。
Reclaim your inner child.
まあ、そんなに言うならいいけどさ。
There's something persuasive about Mashiro's persistence. Natsuhiko pressed the stop button out of necessity. Once they got off the bus, a park spread out before them. There we are. A refreshing afternoon breeze blew through the trees.
いや 何年ぶりかな。
何年だろう。最後いつ来たかも覚えてないな。
あの頃は子供たちみんなここに集まってさ、夏彦中心に遊んだよね。レンレンとかひみっちとかアイポンとか。
Ipon. Mashiro started listing the friends they had back then by the nicknames she had made up for them. And sure enough, hearing all those names made Natsuhiko feel nostalgic.
そうだな。リチオとか杉蔵とか丸一なんてやつもいたな。
Aw.
みんな元気かな。
元気だよ、きっと。
Natsuhiko offered words of mere consolation. They pretty much hadn't seen any of their friends from back then in a long time. Natsuhiko and Mashiro, who attended Rokume Academy, a school exclusively for communicators. Aside of Natsuhiko, Mashiro, and Yuuri, none of the other kids had any aptitude as communicators. Paths their lives took diverged, and after years and years, they simply found themselves going their separate ways.
でもさ、あの頃の夏彦ってほんと友達作るのうまかったよね。
そうか。
学校が違っても年が違ってもこの公園で会ったことは誰でも友達になってたでしょ。ユーリだって後から引っ越してきたのにすぐに仲良くなったもんね。
まあな。
What? Yellow choice. Well, let's keep it here. True enough, that was the sort of kid Natsuhiko was, which is why he made friends with Yuuri, even though she was 2 years older than he was.
それがどうして今じゃ転校生を受け入れられないような子になっちゃったのかな。
なるほど、そうきたか。その話をするために僕をここに連れてきたんだな。
どうだろうね。
Trixie. Mashiro smiled deviously.
まあある意味では夏彦もあの頃から変わってないなって気もするけどさ。だって昔から反りが合わない子には厳しいところもあったじゃない。
そうだっけ。
そうだよ。例えば私に対してとか。
Eh? Natsuhiko stared blankly at her after hearing such a sudden statement.
僕がお前に厳しくしてたって。
ああ、ひどい。覚えてないんだ。ほら、この公園でよく喧嘩したじゃん。
We did? Oh.
喧嘩って。
That word suddenly jogged something in Natsuhiko's memory. Ah, there we go. Something that happened 10 years ago. Natsuhiko and Mashiro were having a fight in the park that day.
何さ、夏彦の提灯フグ。
なんだよ、真っ白のすべすべまんじゅうガニ。
They were fighting over something as trivial as Natsuhiko calling Natsuhiko's favorite superhero show boring. A flustered Yuuri watched the fight from the sidelines.
夏彦くん、真白ちゃん、喧嘩はやめてよ。
ユーリは黙ってろ。
黙ってろって？何さ夏彦、ユーリに向かって偉そうに、この野蛮人。
何を？
Two of them glared at each other, leaving Yuuri alone. At this point in time, Natsuhiko and Mashiro had each already started to get along with Yuuri. There was still terrible animosity between Natsuhiko and Mashiro.
大体何？なんとかまんじゅうがにって意味わかんないよ。
お前の方がわかんねえよ、真っ白のバーカバーカ。
The classic comeback. Oh. What was that? Back in the day, Natsuhiko and Mashiro often fought over every little thing like this. Natsuhiko would get along with everyone else, but for some reason he had a hard time with Mashiro.
付き合ってらんない。
Eventually, Mashiro threw down a sharp parting remark and walked away.
そりゃこっちのセリフだ。
Natsuhiko turned around and shouted back. That was an everyday occurrence for these two. Even Yuuri complained as she watched Mashiro walk away.
どうして夏彦くんって真白ちゃんとはいつも喧嘩ばっかりなの？
だってあいつ 女なのに生意気なんだもん。
Ah, yes.
昔から何かっていうと僕に噛みついてきてさ。
Always. Natsuhiko and Mashiro's houses were nearby, so they knew each other before they could remember. They went to the same kindergarten and therefore had more fights than they could count.
でも夏彦くん、正義のヒーローに憧れてるんでしょ？だったら女の子と喧嘩しちゃダメじゃない？
Ugh. Yuuri hit a weak spot. Natsuhiko had a strong sense of justice. He was a boy who wouldn't hesitate to challenge bullies that were bigger than him. So he yearned to be the sort of champion of justice that he saw in manga or on TV. And Yuuri was right, but...
でも、真白は口は悪いし、パンチも痛いし、あいつはきっと悪の手先なんだ。
そんなことないよ。真白ちゃんはいい子だよ。女の子で一番最初に私の友達になってくれたしね。
Oh. Yuuri vouched for Mashiro with a warm voice. Yuuri was 2 years older than Natsuhiko, so he wouldn't get into a fight with her. What Natsuhiko expected of girls was that they'd be gentle and mature like Yuuri. In other words, the exact opposite of Mashiro. Mashiro was his age and just as strong-willed as he was, which is probably why they would often bump heads.
もっと二人が仲良くなってくれれば私は嬉しいんだけどな。
And they would after Natsuhiko mellowed out a ton.
そんな日はきっと来ないね。
Natsuhiko exaggerated. Mashiro teased Natsuhiko as he remembered that incident.
どう？思い出した？
ああ、まあ。
True enough, it was as Mashiro said. They were mortal enemies back when they were kids.
まあ、そのなんだ。過去は過去。今は今だよ。
まあね。あの頃は夏彦と仲良くなるなんて予想もできなかったからね。
人間関係なんて後々どうなるかわからないな。
そうだよ。だからサリともさ、ちゃんと仲良くしてあげてね。
Easier said than done, Natsuhiko thought as he objected.
いや、だからさ、誰にでも気さくに話しかけられたのは子供だったからだって。というか、壁を作ってるのはサリュの方じゃないのか？クラスの女子に話しかけられてもツンとしてたし。
そうかもしれないけど、だとしても考えてみてよ。あの態度も仕方ないじゃない？
何が？
だってフランスから日本へやってきてさ、しかもコミュニケーター専用の学校に転入するとなれば壁も作りたくなるよ。
Natsuhiko was taken aback by what Mashiro said. Certainly from an outsider's perspective, Rokume Academy may indeed be a bizarre school. Communicators may have started appearing all across the world, but looking at humanity as a whole, they were still an exceptionally rare breed. For example, even in Japan, the proportion of ordinary people to communicators was said to be 25,000 to 1. And this school was filled with nothing but its students who were that rare one. Natsuhiko couldn't even begin to imagine what an ordinary person would think.
例えばサリュが今まで一般人に囲まれて暮らしてたとしたら、やっぱ緊張しちゃうでしょ？
確かにな。エンパシーが使えるやつがそばにいるかもしれないって状況は考えてみれば怖いよな。
夏彦も心を読まれるのを恐れる口なんだね。
そりゃあまあ平気な人もいるかもしれないけど、僕はやっぱり怖いよ。
There probably wouldn't be any issue if telepathy were the only BC ability. However, the problem lied with the other ability, empathy. Telepathy was the ability to convey your mind to others, empathy was the ability to read the minds of others. So for that reason, a lot of ordinary people seemed to fear the communicators. Apparently there used to be an anti-communicator discrimination in the past, too. Which is why the government enacted various policies in order to protect communicators. An example of such legislation was the Communicator Protection Bill, aka the BC Law, enacted 14 years ago. Part of that plan included the establishment of communicator-friendly wards like Rokume City and special schools like Rokume Academy. Where 1 out of 25,000 individuals naturally gathered to the city. About 350 communicators lived in this city, or 20% of all communicators currently in Japan. about 1 in 500 city residents were communicators, and thus many communicators came to live in the same place and received focused protection. Japan led the world in performing such measures, and for its efforts Japan became known as an advanced BC nation. Whew. So really, we didn't advance much except getting to know Salyu. With a few small hints as far as what happened at LABO with Natsuhiko and Yuuri. The city doesn't feel right. And that's about it, really. Kind of a slow episode, more expository than plot advancement, but hope you enjoyed. For now, let's catch up on our tips. The government designated its top secret city. Top secret city dedicated to the advancement of BC research, protection of communicators, and the promotion of correct BC knowledge. Correct BC knowledge? That's a weird term. In accordance with the enactment of BC law, such cities were designated by the BC Research Special Committee. The flow of people in and out of each such city is strictly regulated under the pretense of protecting communicators from persecution and preventing industrial spies from stealing BC research results. Each street that passes into a top-secret city has an inspection gate. Though they are not at the level of the closed city secrecy, in the way Pripyat was not found on maps until after the Chernobyl nuclear reactor disaster, from an outside perspective, these cities do appear to have some similar aspects. Regardless, these government-designated top-secret cities were a success, and at present, over 90% of communicators live in them. However, not all residents outside of Rogame City see its tax reductions and other benefits as positives. Some cynically see the benefits as a sign that the city is a biased ward for the preferential treatment of communicators. It only fosters more degradation, more consternation. Kinda like the existing divide between rural and urban in our society, eh? Advanced BC Nation refers to a nation with a deep understanding of communicators that maintains communicator protective services and produces significant BC research results. Okay. Japan heads the list on such nations with its efforts to gather its communicators into the protection of 6 government-designated top-secret cities that have provided environments conducive to smooth BC research. Opposition to communicators in BC is strong in the West, so even if they were to establish similar locations, they would be unable to conduct public BC research. Opposition is particularly strong in France, with demonstrators calling for the extermination of BC continuing to this day. In France? Wow. I mean, interesting choice. BC law. A law that was passed on December 12, 2015 and went into effect on April 1, 2016 to protect the human rights of communicators. Its formal name is the BC Research Regulation and Communicator Human Rights Protection Law. That's a mouthful. The government became fearful of the possibility of communicator persecution in the aftermath of the Great Rokame City arson of September 2014. Oh, that sounds important. As a precaution, they rapidly enacted the law with the intention of spreading correct knowledge about BC through the cities. Okay, and correct knowledge in this context seems to be not misinformation, which is fair. The main point of the law was that it established 6 government-designated top-secret cities nationwide to gather and protect the communicators. The BC Research Special Committee was formed from the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare, as well as the Ministry of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology. The committee was tasked to lead efforts into implementing the law, but while promoting correct understanding of BC was a noble cause, the committee did not quite understand BC themselves. The flustered and unsightly passing of the buck became a hot topic for variety shows and newspapers. Understandable. VOVO Episode 1. Only I had psychic powers, I'd bring smiles to all their faces. Inspired by a program on psychic powers they saw on TV, Kirara and her classmates tried their hardest to bend spoons with their minds at school. At that moment, Kirara's pure wish becomes psychic power and everyone's spoons start to bend one by one. everyone's spoons except for Kirara's as well. That was because her wish was to bring smiles to their faces and not her own. The purpose of this scene is to foreshadow Kirara's top-class psychic powers, but also paints a picture of the pure kindness of her spirit. Psychic Girl Beyond official guidebook. If only you could use psychic powers, you'd be able to bring smiles to everyone's faces, Mashiro mused as she smiled at Natsuhiko. The nonchalant remark probably meant, if Natsuhiko became able to use BC, I'm sure he'd use his powers for good. If there ever comes a time where he ought to use his power for himself, I'd hesitate to do so. When such a time comes, maybe I'll give him a little push from behind. A sentiment filled with Mashiro's pure kindness and consideration? Probably. Oh, good old LABO. We got a lot of lengthy tips today. A nuclear research facility on the outskirts of Rokame City. Read that 100 times. Though it is a nationally owned facility, Rokame City is entrusted with its control and management. Due to the fact that the facility is equipped with a small nuclear reactor for research purposes, and because of the need to protect the secrecy of the important research related to national affairs, security is strict around the vicinity of LABO. You cannot even get within 10 kilometers of the facility without first passing through a security gate. Even if you sneak past the gate, the path to LABO is equipped with countless surveillance cameras. Further inside is a private task force above the law, equipped with rubber bullet guns. Though the entire thing may seem excessive, the fact remains that the government subsidies granted to LABO make Rokame City a city that is easy to live in. None of the citizens seem to let it bother them, figuring to just let sleeping dogs lie. Yeah, that LABO task force is real sus. Real sus. I saw them vent. Rokame Park. A nature park on the outskirts of Rokame City. The vast grounds may have many amenities for citizens to relax, such as a grassy square, a pond with rental boats, a botanical garden, and a cycling course. It is a nostalgic place for Natsuhiko. It's where he first met Yuuri, where he strangely got along with Mashiro after initially butting heads with her. It's still a suitable playground for children as it was in the past, but there are several surveillance cameras set up along the greenery. They are installed as a precaution due to the park's proximity to a city gate. Since they are casually placed within the greenery, they have many blind spots. Oh. That seems dangerous. Are we going to encounter trouble here? I am afraid to find out. We are still in the park after all. I have a bad feeling that we might find out. We're fucking around, and we're gonna find out.